Hello.
Special thanks to Onasaber for sponsoring our 90,000 subscriber lightsaber giveaway. Really close to giving it away, so all the details and pinned comment down below. Our story begins on Mustafar. Master and apprentice were facing off and would likely be their final duel. The fate of the galaxy rested on this very moment. If Obi-Wan lost, he would allow the galaxy to be subjugated to a reign of terror. If Anakin lost, then Sidious would lose his prized pupil. Their duel crossed over the lava river, and Obi-Wan, at the end of it, was able to find a location to dismount to. Obi-Wan then landed and looked down the lava bank at his pupil and felt nothing but shame. He told Anakin to not try it, but in the back of his mind, he knew exactly what Anakin would do. His arrogance would get the best of him, and he would make a fatal mistake. Obi-Wan didn't want to kill Anakin. Truthfully, he was hoping that at some point he would snap out of it, but he didn't. Kenobi watched Anakin's feet steady, and Obi-Wan shook his head. Then, it was too late. Anakin launched himself into the air. Obi-Wan did the best he could. He threw his blade into the air, knowing that using the Force against Anakin would likely be impossible in this type of scenario. Obi-Wan's blade slid right into Anakin's side, and it stopped him in the middle of the air. Kenobi winced when he heard the stinging sound of skin sizzling. His outward thrust only threw Anakin backwards as he dropped. His face left in shock as his body tumbled lower and lower to the lava river. The stab in his side left him feeling almost immobilized. Had Obi-Wan gone any further to the left, he would have been dead, just as Qui-Gon. Luckily for Anakin, the blade missed some key organs and avoided his spinal column. Skywalker slid down to the bottom of the river, and the tips of his boots touched the lava, igniting a flame. Obi-Wan couldn't bear to watch his friend, his student, as he bursted into flames and yelled out at him, telling him how much he hated him. Obi-Wan just turned away, grabbing Anakin's lightsaber, and returned to Padme's ship to take her to a safe location so she could have the children. Anakin, on the other hand, lay at the bottom of the riverbank, his skin all rotten and shredded from being burned. He used both of his hands to pull himself up as much as he could. While his metallic arm was doing most of the work, he allowed the dark side to fuel him even further as he lashed on with raw skin and nearly bare bones as he pulled himself up little by little. This only fueled the darkness within Anakin. The worst part about the burns he was suffering from is that he was burned so badly that he couldn't even feel the pain. He was just torn to pieces, and so many of his skin cells had been completely killed off that the pain didn't exist for him. Though if he wasn't saved soon, he would likely die from the exposure, especially here on Mustafar. He got tired of pulling himself up the banks and he stopped. His breath shallowed out, and he looked at the ground under his chin. He knew he couldn't die like this. He couldn't. Skywalker put one hand up and felt a familiar presence. Anakin's eyes drifted up from the sulfur ash and stood under him to the hooded man at the top of the bank. He was standing right where Obi-Wan was right before he lost. What perfect imagery of the undertaking Skywalker's about to go on. If everything was Kenobi's fault, then surely everything was Palpatine's. Though not even Anakin could structure a proper response in his mind. All the adrenaline from the loss kept his mind in an isolated state of confusion. As Sidious descended the hill to Anakin's side, Skywalker rolled over and Sidious could see the wound in his side. It was filled with the sulfur that he crawled up across. For the Sith Lord, he couldn't help but feel shame. Anakin was meant to become the greatest Sith the galaxy had ever seen. The entire purpose of turning him was to ensure the Chosen One did not bring balance to the Force, and Anakin's master was able to undo all of that. Sidious thought inside of his devious mind on how he could punish Skywalker for his failures. Clearly Vader wouldn't need a full suit. As his mind was running through scenarios, he felt a warm, clammy hand brush across his robes. Sidious looked down in disgust as he turned back to look for the troopers. Anakin tried to squeeze out any type of word, but it fell short at the edge of his mouth, like he couldn't speak due to the burns he suffered. Sidious could tell what his student was trying to say. It was somewhere between "I failed you" and "I can't believe you." Though Sidious didn't care. He'd make sure Vader knew what failure meant when they returned to Coruscant. The trip from Mustafar to the capital of the Empire was agonizing for Skywalker. He almost died a number of times on the way. The burn wounds hurt him more than anything could have. The irony being is Skywalker couldn't imagine a scenario where this could be any worse. When they arrived at the Republic medical facility, Anakin was ushered into the highest point in the tower, where Sidious had already prepared everything for him. The difficulty with working on Skywalker was the speed they needed to do it with. With a full body burned, they had to make sure they saved him before they could really do anything else. The medical droids layered his body in Bacta and then began working on his breathing. Because the burns so badly damaged him, he was on the verge of death, simply because he couldn't breathe. Sidious just watched from the corner of the room with a scowl. He was so disappointed, mostly because he thought Kenobi as any run-of-the-mill Jedi. It wasn't like Skywalker fought Windu, Yoda, Agan, Kol, or Plo Koon. He fought Obi-Wan. Maybe it was Sidious's fault for doubting that Obi-Wan had the potential, but nonetheless, Vader should have been able to win. Hours would pass by, with Vader passing in and out of life and death. On the far side of the galaxy, Padme had already given birth and died. Luke and Leia were split up among the Organas and the Lars and sent off. Yoda was left on his own in exile, and Obi-Wan did the same thing as his master did, went away to hide and forget until the time was right. On Coruscant, Lord Vader was reborn. His skin was covered with pieces of silk-like cloth that was lined with the interior of Bacta. This wasn't Sidious's choice, more so that the medical droids did it themselves. The tragedy is, Sidious wouldn't have allowed it, but he left the room. The operation took much longer. Instead of the droids just worrying about the torso, they had to make sure they saved every limb, so they didn't have to remove any of them. It was a bit tedious to do, but in the end, it saved Anakin from having to lose an arm or his legs to amputation. Skywalker still wasn't fully conscious. He was flashing in and out of understanding what was all going on around him. When Sidious came back in, he noticed a striking resemblance between Lord Vader and one of the mighty Sith the galaxy had ever seen, Darth Malgus. Anakin's burnt skin was only visible around his face. A hood was laid over the back of his head so he could begin healing, and placed around his neck was a respirator. It stretched up and covered his mouth as well, just to make sure that he could breathe no matter what. There was also Bacta laced around the interior of the respirator. This wasn't defiance from the droids, rather just programming. The operation nearly took an entire day, and with Anakin's skin constantly in touch with Bacta, there actually might be hope for him after all. Sidious, when Vader rose, told his people about the rise of the Empire, but Vader had only one question, which was, where was Padme? She was killed by Vader, according to Sidious, which launched Vader into a spiral of anger, where every object in the room was lifted up into the air. Sidious didn't care for this because he was one of those objects, and he punished his people by electrocuting him for a little bit. It wasn't a long time, but it was enough to tell Skywalker that Sidious was in charge. It's what Sidious wanted Vader to understand. After their little debacle, Sidious brought Skywalker out of the medical facility. There is one key difference with an unmasked Vader. Sidious had no issue having him around. Due to the burn scars in the mask and the hood, people wouldn't be able to tell who Vader was. Sure, the eyes would lead to several conspiracy theories in the media, but who doesn't love a little conspiracy surrounding shady figures? With this, Sidious was able to openly keep his pet on a short leash around him, though he knew it would only be a matter of time until Vader became an unstoppable force. Sidious made sure it didn't come to that. Lord Vader had an incurable hunger for killing Jedi. He wouldn't rest until every last one of them was dead. However, this did leave some trouble for him. Sidious knew that's what Vader wanted and decided to keep him away from it. The only Jedi Vader was allowed to hunt down was a 200-year-old Jedi Master from the era of the High Republic, the one who took the bearish vow and disappeared. It was Master Infla, and when Vader arrived to his home, he slaughtered him with his bare hands. It wasn't easy, but Anakin was still used to his body. Without the suit, Vader was able to focus on the dark side and allow it to fill him. While the Bacta robes were helping him significantly with the healing process, he was actively avoiding self-loathing. This meant he was never questioning his decisions. He only delved deeper into the dark side without a hint of regret. All he did was blame others for his own mistakes. His turn to the dark side was self-justified. The death of his wife due to the council and due to him not being strong enough. His loss to Kenobi was the only thing he couldn't wrap his mind around. A lot of these delusions held him in a state of anger, and Sidious thrived off of it. With so much anger throbbing from the student, he sent Vader back to Mustafar before the end of his first year, and it only showed how much pain Vader had incurred. He couldn't live with the defeat, and once his kyber crystal shined with a glimmering crimson haze, Vader couldn't help but look for the moment in which he would be able to drive the weapon through Obi-Wan's stomach and kill him. It brought him the only sense of peace he had to think about. Considering Vader was allowed to be in the public eye, he spent a good amount of time around the Emperor in his office, usually just standing idly as people came and went to talk to the Emperor about things in the Senate. Since the beginning of the Empire, Sidious was no longer at every Senate session. That job went to the Vizier of the Empire, Mas Amedda. It was just another perk of being Emperor. But this did make Anakin have meetings with some of Padme's former friends and allies, some of which he was particularly close with when he was Anakin Skywalker. The sad change is that not a single one of them knew who he was. Despite his eyebrows and even hair starting to grow back, he showed no semblance to the man they knew. His piercing yellow eyes made it hard to recognize any bit of Skywalker left within him. Though as Anakin stood by Sidious' side, he recognized a familiarity that sat within Bail Organa. He didn't know what it was, but he decided to conduct his own investigation into it. Before his trip to Mustafar, he learned that Bail and Breha Organa had themselves a child, a daughter named Leia Organa. Anakin found this peculiar. Despite his efforts to kill off Anakin Skywalker, he found himself often grumbling over the past, and the names that he and Padme came up with before her untimely death at his hands. The one thing that irked Anakin is that he didn't remember Breha appearing to be pregnant at the end of the war. Obviously, Padme didn't show that either, but Breha wouldn't have any real reason to hide such pregnancies. So he decided to go back and look at articles from Alderaan from the year beforehand and found many people praising her for the fit she carried throughout pregnancy. As the Queen of Alderaan, she was always in the spotlight. Vader's obsession with this led him to sneak off Coruscant. He found himself Bail Organa's personal vessel, named the Tantive 4, and boarded when no one was looking. He hid in the ship as it moved from Coruscant to Alderaan, and while he was in the ship, he went through the databases of the vessel. He saw that the ship made some stops at normal locations. Coruscant, Chandrelia, Corellia, Kuat, Eridu, Alderaan, normal places, but the one that really piqued his curiosity was Polis Massa. What would he be doing out there near the end of the Clone Wars? Wait, not near the end, at the end. Literally a day after the war ended, Bail Organa was out there. How peculiar, especially since he was in deep space for a moment, somewhere between Utapau and Kashyyyk, not to mention the immediate stop at Coruscant shortly after. Something wasn't adding up for Vader. But before he went to investigate the Organa's residence, which would likely be more difficult, he caught himself a ride to Polis Massa. This of course wasn't just any ride, he killed the pilot and took his ship. Upon his arrival to Polis Massa, he found a security recording of Padme's death. This of course took a number of hours to siphon through and find, but when he found it, he was left with a terrible pain inside of his chest. One pain that could decide to go one of two directions. As he fell to his knees, with his fists balled up, he felt tears on his face seep into his skin and drift around his mask. His brows firmed, and he realized that not only had cities lied to him, but his children still existed in the galaxy. His initial reaction was to find them, but as it turns out, he likely already knew where one of them was, because there was a girl named Leia, born here on Polis Massa. Maybe not so much a coincidence, and a truth. Perhaps Bail Organa did steal his child. What about the boy, though? Vader knew he had to return to Alderaan, but before he did, he found himself at a bacta tank and took a small moment for himself. Vader, over the past year since his defeat on Mustafar, was making a fine recovery. However, there was still a lot of nerve damage done to him. Most of the damage done to his skin was unrepairable. However, there was some hair growing for him, most notably on his head and over his eyes. Though the damage that was done was more so in the fact that his skin cells no longer had any pain receptors. Some of them did, but for the most part, he had been burnt so bad that they just been lost. Of course, a few of them returned, but for the most part, his skin was absolutely numb. He couldn't, aside from a few places on his cheeks and forearms, feel the cool Coruscant breeze and the heat of the Mustafaran fires, when he was there, of course. It was a shallow experience of life, but he made the best of it. Despite not being able to physically feel that much pain, he still made up for it with the dark side. A large part of the dark side was feeling pain and turning into power. But he was just a monster of power. All it took for Skywalker was one awakening, and he would surpass every known being in galactic history with the power that he could wield. During his back-to-bath, he sat in silence for what felt like days. He just closed his eyes and felt the cool bacta swarm his body. Outside of his tank, the medical droids were fulfilling his request to have his robes lined with bacta on the interior. Anakin knew that the man who was Anakin was gone. And despite the fact that Padme said there was still good in him, the man who would have buckled at the knees and surrendered himself to the light did not exist anymore. The key difference was the lack of a suit. The suit of Darth Vader would have trapped him like an animal. It would have caused him more pain than he could bear. He would have had to hold himself together with the Force just to walk. Without the suit, he didn't have so many feelings of regret for having joined the dark side, and if his children still lived, there was a chance for rekindling what had been lost. Vader's anger grew, and he burst into the bacta tank and flung himself out by accident. The medical droids swarmed him and helped him up. He was drenched, but it was still bacta, so it was for the better. He looked at the droids and then had his robes lifted around him. He thanked the droids and prepared to leave. As he got to the vessel, he looked at the dead body in the bay and walked over it like it was trash, and lifted it up towards Alderaan. When he eventually arrived at the planet, he landed in the forest outside the royal palace. Naturally, this would get the attention of the Alderaanian guard, which it did. Vader walked through the forest and found a couple of guards searching for his vessel, but not a single one of them had a chance to identify him as their bodies dropped to the ground under the sounds of broken necks. Vader walked up to the doors at the bottom of the palace and flung them open. He looked inside and then heard the sound of a couple dozen men or so coming his way to investigate the sound. Before they could round the corner, Vader ignited his lightsaber and launched it down the hallway as it sliced through each and every single one of them. Their bodies dropped and Vader walked into the room to see one of them still alive. Vader twisted his hand and continued forward. He entered the elevator and waited for it to ascend to the top of the building. He didn't realize, but the entire palace was now on lockdown, and when the doors opened, he was clipped in the shoulder by a blaster. This was before the entire elevator was filled with blaster fire. Vader ducked out of the way and hid in the crevice between the door and the wall. He grabbed his lightsaber and felt the elevator slip before being caught. He slid out from behind the crevice and began blocking shots. His movements were flawless, as if he hadn't missed a day since his last confrontation with Kenobi. Vader slammed his blade across the guards, moving so fast that their eyes could barely capture him for a moment. When the guards were all dead, he listened through the Force and he could feel the connection. The same one he picked up the trace of on Coruscant, the same one that led him here. Vader turned his head to see a couple more guards running out of the room, but they didn't even have a chance. Vader launched them into the ceiling and held them there as he walked under them. Bail and Breya were trapped, and when Vader came into the room, he cut them down without showing a hint of mercy. When he got to his child, he looked at her, and he saw her eyes. She was the daughter of Padme and Anakin. He picked her up, and the moment he did, he felt a surge to the Force, one so large that it was as if every single barrier that had ever filled his heart and filled his mind had vanished. He felt like he could destroy planets with a snap of a finger, and rip armies to their knees with a blink of an eye. For a short moment, he vanished, and then he returned and looked at his daughter in his hands. He told her that it would be alright, and he would take care of her from now. Instead of taking the ship he arrived on, Vader went to the Tantive 4, just because he knew it would be outfitted with everything he needed for his daughter. As he prepared to lift off, he could hear a siren coming from the palace. He knew they'd be coming for him soon. Luckily for him, he did everything he could. He destroyed the camera and there was no survivors inside the palace. Vader turned on the engines and lifted up and out of the hangar the ship was in before jumping into hyperspace. The coordinates given were just random space. He wanted to figure out his next plans. He knew that Sidious would be very displeased with him, and he also wanted to find where his other child was. He sat in the office space that Bail often used. Vader remembered the time he and Padme were on the ship and talking with Bail. The thought of Padme sent Anakin back into himself, and he decided he would try and find that memory. He remembered Bail saying to Padme that he didn't need to write anything down, because if he forgot it, he would just check the recordings. Anakin's heart got a little giddy with excitement as he turned on the holo device. He told Leia that he would show her mother. As he turned on the device and searched through the dates, he couldn't believe his eyes. There was an automated recording from the same day he lost his fight to Kenobi. He didn't think it was possible, but maybe it was. Surely Bail would have removed it, but he may have forgotten. Being a new father and wanting to fight against a space dictator took his mind off the issue, especially because at this point, he still needed to have Padme transported back to Naboo so that she could be buried. Vader stopped with his giddiness and turned on the recording. He watched Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Bail talk about his children. Yoda suggested they be split up. Bail immediately told him that he would take the girl, being that he and Breya always wanted to have a baby girl. Vader looked on as his brows creased. He watched Obi-Wan ask about Luke, and Yoda spoke up telling Kenobi that he'd be taken to his family on Tatooine. Obi-Wan then suggested that he would watch over the boy. Vader got angrier and watched Obi-Wan and Bail get up. As they bowed to Yoda, the Grand Master told Obi-Wan to stop. He said he would teach Obi-Wan how to communicate with Master Qui-Gon. This only added to Anakin's anger. He thought it to be so hypocritical that Yoda could learn to speak to Qui-Gon, but Anakin could not save his wife. Vader was misinterpreting the situation due to his anger, and he missed the point. Yoda wasn't communicating with Qui-Gon due to attachment. He was doing it to continue his knowledge that every Jedi seek to obtain. Nothing about it had to do with connections or attachments, but it didn't matter. Vader was returning home. Something about the return to Tatooine irked Skywalker more than anything else. The last 2 times he was here, he was with people he no longer had. The first time was with Padme, when his mother died, and the second was with Ahsoka. This didn't help Vader refrain from his anger. He just got more and more frustrated with everything. But he set coordinates to Tatooine and made the jump. At the same time, he got a communication from Sidious, who was pissed off. Sidious wanted to know why Vader killed Organa. He was a powerful senator, and his voice held a lot of weight for people on both sides of the aisle, even those who were supporters of Palpatine. This didn't look good because it looked like Sidious was trying to oust rivals of his, and while Sidious wanted Bail gone, he didn't want him gone in that way. With the recent assassination of Ryu Chuchi, senators were already on edge, and this was not helping Sidious's case. The call was never answered by Vader. He didn't care. He would kill Kenobi, Owen, and Beru, and then he would take his child back. The trip was long, but when he eventually arrived outside the Lars homestead, just so that it was extra apparent what was happening here, he prepared to murder. Vader exited in a blur, and before they knew it, Beru and Owen were killed. They didn't stand a chance, and Vader's son was brought on board the ship. 2 infants barely older than a year old. Being that Vader was Anakin, he decided to be dramatic. He burned the Lars homestead and waited for Kenobi. He simply stood outside the home as the day passed by, allowing the 2 sons to cook his skin. Obi-Wan hadn't been home all day. He was now working to get food and just to eat. It was quite the 180 from the life as a Jedi. For the past year, since his fight with Anakin, he had tried to forgo the way of the Jedi. That had not worked out too well. He was struggling with letting go. He still had both his and Anakin's lightsabers in his cave. He was preparing to put them into the desert and forget about the past, but he held on. The Force, on the other hand, he cut himself off from. He didn't allow himself to feel anything through the Force for the longer part of the last year, so when he came home to see the fires burning, he panicked. He grabbed both his and Anakin's lightsabers and ran to the Lars homestead. As he closed in, he could see a shadowy figure standing in front of the fires, and behind him was the Tantive 4. Being that he was convinced Skywalker died on Mustafar, he prepared himself for a fight against Sidious. That is until he heard, through a robotic voice, his name called. It wasn't easy to see, but he could see familiar eyes. Those eyes called to him. He knew them. Obviously, he knew Palpatine was Sidious, but this was not Palpatine. It was someone he was... And then he clicked. A red lightsaber ignited from Skywalker's side, and he walked forward. Obi-Wan asked what he had become, and Vader said only 6 words, telling Obi-Wan that he is what he made him. Kenobi had to fight for both the lives of Luke and Leia. The fate of the galaxy rested on this moment, and 2 blue lightsabers ignited as he prepared to defend the children of Anakin Skywalker from the monster that resurrected from the fires of Mustafar. Vader stormed forward, and Obi-Wan did too. But it was easy to see how uneasy he was. He hadn't held the blades in so long. The moment Vader raised his blade, Obi-Wan knew it was over. He blocked the strike, and then they peeled off. Vader was playing with his food. He wanted to savor every moment of this victory. Kenobi backpedaled and blocked a strike before parrying another. As their blades toiled back and forth with short breaks in between, Obi-Wan's left to catch his breath. The suns began to set as Kenobi and Skywalker stood their final stand against each other, their shadows illuminated by the light of the two suns before they engaged again. Obi-Wan was thrown backwards. This was no different from the fight on Mustafar. Skywalker was still more powerful, but he was holding back. This wasn't a sign of growth, it was a sign of fueling his revenge. Vader dropped his blade down again and Obi-Wan fell into the sands. Vader just watched him scramble to his feet before launching himself forward. Vader pulled Obi-Wan back and cut down, removing his forearm before bashing Obi-Wan in the jaw with his metallic hand. Kenobi staggered and Vader simply dragged his blade across the sands, throwing it to Obi-Wan's eyes before blocking a strike behind his back and dragging the weapon across Obi-Wan's chest. It was over as quickly as it began. Vader took Obi-Wan's and his own blade before moving back inside the Tantive 4 to return to Coruscant. Across the galaxy on Dagobah, Yoda fell down from his meditation. He was levitating off the ground, but he could feel it. The moment it happened, he felt Obi-Wan's life become extinguished. What was he to do? Vader, while in hyperspace, decided to be appropriate to respond to Sidious, but the moment he answered the call, he was lifted off the ground with the Force. Vader's feet kicked in the air as he felt his respirator gears grind on the interior of his throat. Sidious threw him backwards and he slammed into a wall. He told Vader that his actions caused a serious outburst in the Senate. He was extremely disappointed in Vader's inability to have a mind of consciousness. He called Vader a fool and told him to return to Coruscant immediately. Vader nodded his head, and the hologram ended. He was furious. What did he do to deserve that? He didn't do anything to offset the balance in the Senate. He hadn't seen the communication Sidious sent before, or even considered the effects of killing Organa. When Vader returned to Coruscant, he kept the children safe, and had a trusted protocol droid take care of them. He did accidentally destroy R2 and 3PO inside the palace, but truthfully, he didn't realize they were even there. He just assumed they went to Padme's family. When Vader entered the Emperor's office, he heard something peculiar, and when he turned the corner, he saw Sidious and Yoda dueling. Their blades were colliding, and Vader just looked on with joy. Sidious told Vader to get involved, but he didn't care. He could kill whoever won. Sidious was thrown backwards into the wall. Yoda finally, after all this time, was able to come back and exact his own revenge. But it wasn't revenge, it was to save the galaxy. But Sidious could see it. The demeanor inside Yoda had changed during their fight, and the dark side began to flourish. He took advantage of said power and used it. Sidious cried out for Vader's help, and Yoda turned around to Vader, lunging forward. Yoda didn't know Vader survived and came here. Assuming Sidious found the children, that's why he came to Coruscant. Truthfully, Sidious was confused when Yoda entered the office looking for the children. He didn't know what Yoda was talking about. To Sidious, everything clicked. And instead of using Vader, he would just take the twins. Now it made sense. Chances are they were created by the Force to undo what Skywalker did. As Yoda engaged with Vader, the former Grandmaster was launched back. The awakening inside of Vader from Alderaan made his presence all the more intimidating. Sidious laughed watching Yoda fall to the ground. He remembered telling Yoda that Vader would be more powerful than either of them. He was right, until that worked against him, and Vader, without even turning his head, swung his blade across Sidious's neck, decapitating him. Yoda was shocked to see it, but he had to react quickly, as the blade was coming for him next. With his back against the ground, he threw both of his hands up and blocked with his lightsaber. Vader stood over Yoda with a sinister look in his eyes, as he thrusted his blade down as hard as he could. The old Grandmaster tried to hold on, but the heat of his own blade was bearing against his chest, and it was all demoralizing. Yoda didn't stand a chance. His blade cut across his chest first, and moments later Anakin completed a massive T along his face. Anakin stood up and looked down at his accomplishment. His two greatest rivals in the Force were now dead. He did it. He was the victor. Vader turned back around and looked at Mas Amedda, who demanded to know what was happening. Vader looked to his side and then to Mas. He told the Visor to kneel before his Emperor. Mas Amedda didn't have a fighting chance of surviving if he said no, so he did. He knelt down and Vader walked up to him, his lightsaber still glistening in the room. He bent over and whispered into Mas's ear and told him that he would inform the Senate of the change in leadership. He was the Emperor now, though that didn't really matter. What mattered to him was his continued expansion into the darkness and the raising of Luke and Leia Skywalker. That's all he wanted and that's all he had. Vader's ascension to the role of Emperor would go by smoothly, mostly because he was always with Sidious for the year up until his death at the hands of the Jedi. Vader knew about the Inquisitors and kept them around. For sport, of course, but he wanted the Jedi to rebuild. It was the joy of allowing the enemy to think they had a chance, but the reality is, they didn't. Aside from Kenobi and Yoda, there were about 104 survivors of the Purge. 99% were killed. Most of them went into hiding, but a good number of them didn't. The others began mounting up. Coleman Kaj, Terrace Sanube, Jocasta Nu, Keller and Beck, Nari, Quinlan Voss, and Balin Skull. The culmination of these Jedi would be exposed when the Emperor found a collection of 43 Jedi on the outskirts of the galaxy. Vader spent 6 years raising his children, alone, and he loved every moment of it. Despite his loyalty to the dark side, he was able to pass on his gifts to his children, while maintaining a healthy relationship with them. On that 6th year, he went to this collection of Jedi and massacred them all by himself. Some of them were Council members, others were the faces that were the future. None of them survived. They fought with all their strength, but a Sith Lord who could manifest the darkness that Skywalker could was able to wipe the floor with him without even having a second guess of his actions. Luke and Leia were given Obi-Wan and Anakin's lightsabers. They both picked the weapon that they wished to don. Leia took Kenobi's because she liked the hilt, and Luke took Anakin's. When they were the age of 14, they got to kill their first Jedi. It was 2 former younglings, or Padawans, but they were rounded up by the Inquisitors. As per Vader's request, the Inquisitors weren't accepting new members after Vader's little scourge of the Jedi collection. Luke killed Cal Kestis and Leia killed Reva. It was a real shame that the Jedi hadn't joined the Inquisitors sooner. Regardless, Vader's empire was a powerhouse. Instead of playing politics, Vader played Raxus roulette. Except when the barrel came to him, there was never any bullets in it. Anyone who opposed him died, and they were replaced within hours. Loyalty was the name of the game, and power was the goal. The one thing about Vader's regime is that, despite his role as a Sith, he refused to allow the Empire to harbor slaves. It was outlawed, and in many ways, despite the lack of any representation in the Senate, Vader's empire was much more lax than Sidious's would have been. While Vader found out about the cloning projects early on, he didn't care for them. He shut them down, and any chances of them being furthered were discontinued. He extinguished the memory of Sidious and made sure that his time as Emperor and Sith were long forgotten. His children, on the other hand, became monsters. They were born and bred to use the dark side unlike any beings the galaxy had ever seen. Vader turned them into these monsters. After they bled their lightsabers, they killed every single Inquisitor, as per their father's request. Though as they continued to get older, something became more and more apparent to one of them. Leia had more cognizance as an infant than Luke did. This meant that Leia remembered her parents. She also remembered her real mother. She remembered her father killing her parents. It left a sick twist in her stomach, and she in turn decided she would look more into the information regarding her past. It was extremely difficult. This was because of her father's intent to cover up the past. Ironically, it wasn't because he feared one of his children stumbling upon it. It was just because he was covering up the past. Leia learned a lot about what her father hadn't told her, and she very quickly became disgusted with the idea of everything that she didn't know about up until this point in her life. She didn't realize that the blade belonged to a man who her biological mother trusted, a man who was a father figure in many ways to her own father. The disgust only perturbed her more, and she decided that she would take things into her own hands. One night, after she and her brother sparred for the 10th time in a row, she joined Luke at her father's throne inside the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. He prided his students on their hard work, and he told them that they were true Sith, true users of the darkness. They were his pride. Vader was up and walking around, rather than sitting on his throne, and then he turned back to face his throne. He called his daughter's name and asked what was on her mind. She quickly told him that it was nothing, but as he turned around, he looked at a red lightsaber igniting before his very own eyes. Luke leapt up, but he was too slow to move. Leia didn't hit the mark. She was stopped in midair. Vader looked at her, and then told her that he was very disappointed. He flung Leia to the other side of the room, and told her that she should not choose the path of light. It would only bring her pain and suffering. Luke stood by his father's side, his hand on his belt. Leia looked at the two of them, and she told Luke that he was a failure of his son to their mother. The dig didn't mean as much for Luke as it did Leia. His lack of memories surrounding Padme Amidala left him without any sort of shame regarding her comments. Vader gave her one chance to put down her weapon, but she didn't, and he told Luke to finish her. Vader sat back down on his throne. The dark side was too much for him to resist. The only thing that impeded that darkness was his love for his children, but it was far too late for him to return to the light. He just wanted Luke to stop Leia, not to actually kill her. He watched Luke and Leia, 21 years of experience against the other, trained from the day they returned to their father's grasp. And now, they were fighting for a spot at the throne, or a spot to challenge their father. Luke was very heavy with his strikes. He took after his father a lot, but his size didn't. The form he used worked really well, but oftentimes throughout his training, it was clearly noticeable that he tried to fight just like his father, which is something as a much smaller person than his father, he struggled to do. Leia chose a form that benefited her, and so she was really dainty on her feet, quickly avoiding the heavy strikes made by her brother until the moment came and he opened himself up for an attack. It was a heavy strike that hit her blade, but she slid off the strike and doubled back around and slung the blade through his chest. She extinguished the weapon. Vader was shocked. Luke was shocked. Leia was shocked. Vader looked on in so much shame. He didn't want either of them to die, but so be it. He stood up and grabbed his lightsaber. He told her that he never wanted this for her. she scowled at him, telling him that she never chose this life. She then hit him with Padme would have never loved him like this. Vader's anger soared. To hear this from a child who never met the woman only enticed him to rage. He had convinced himself in the years since Padme's death that she would have accepted this change for the better and stood by his side, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Vader told his daughter that she would never understand. His love for the three of them always outmatched his care for anything else in the galaxy. Leia looked at her father. She knew she couldn't beat him. There was no chance at doing that, and she wasn't a Jedi. She wouldn't restart some lost order even if she could beat him or survive. He stepped forward, each step heavier than the one that came before him. Leia looked at her brother, who was still on the floor, coughing up his last breaths. Leia told her father that his love for them cost him everything he was. He looked at her in a peculiar way as she brought her lightsaber before her eyes and told him it would cost him again. Her lightsaber ignited. Vader's eyes opened as wide as they could and his heart shattered. Leia, at the last moment, twisted her blade back towards herself and ignited it. She dropped to the floor next to her brother, who by this point had wheezed out his last breath. Vader dropped to his knees and looked on in so much shame. What had he done? His pain mixed with agony, shame, and anger. He caused all of this. How could he escape it? Vader held his dead children for days. He never could let go of them, but at some point he would have to. Instead of seeing it as a cataclysm for change, he saw it as a reason to delve deeper into the dark side. He pushed himself further and further and decided to try Sidis's plans, creating cloning facilities only for them to give him nothing in return. The brokenness he felt would never be replaced. Despite that, Vader's empire defeated copious amounts of rebellions by thrusting the mind of Grand Admiral Thrawn into power. Vader never relished in victory again, though. His life as Emperor had many ups and downs, but despite his early victories in life, no amount of clones could ever replace what he lost. When his children turned against each other because of his own actions, he lost himself. And that, my friends, is our ambiguous ending. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewoo670, Ozitano, CT7567, Ozavaz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Jody Naguin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Kali, Youngly Slayer 66, Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Forder's Legacy, Star Wars, Lemon Knight, Rex, The Wolf, Man of 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Barrett, Joshua, and Lord Denway for supporting the channel. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the Patreon. Sith Clone Wars is coming. Got 4 more episodes to write, or maybe more, I don't know. I might write the 4 and I might decide to do more, but you'll know if you do the thing and I can mispronounce your name, which is kind of cool. Otherwise, let's talk about the story, because it ended super ambiguously, and that was intended. I don't know if ambiguously is a word, but it is now. The main conflict in the story is Vader's darkness, and the thing I wanted to kind of focus on was him becoming essentially Malchus in his own way. It was him just delving further and further into the darkness, and like that moment, that crucial moment where he could choose light or dark, and he chooses dark. That is his permanent path. And so the reason there's not much else is because it's literally just him chilling on a throne trying to create clones that doesn't go anywhere. I think that having his arms burnt and all that stuff would just be terrible for him, but it'd be much better than losing his armor. I think the main difference is that he would still be, like, he'd still have the body of Anakin, he just wouldn't be this hulking monster. He'd actually be able to kind of heal back into himself, but despite the respirator, which is always going to be there, he's able to, like, kind of get back into his prime, if you will. And that's kind of the intent of this video, is him to grow back into his prime. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, friends, may the Force be with you.